Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares, and I've got another time-lapse here. This one ends up being a little street scene of a flower shop, although maybe that was evident from the title and thumbnail anyway. I'm never really sure how much to share of the actual artwork in the thumbnail itself, because I always sort of reveal it anyway. But yeah, what we're seeing now is just me working on the line work before getting into shading and color. What I wanted to focus on for this time-lapse though is the idea of conceptualizing a new piece of art, and also how to go about selecting appropriate colors to use within it. Colors that look nice but also kind of match the concept that you have in mind. When I'm thinking about what to make for a new piece of pixel art, for me it's really about finding a pairing between subject matter and art style. For subject matter, that'd be broad ideas like character concepts, scenery, or maybe just the idea of doing a fan art piece. And then for art style, specifically pixel art style, there's sort of a whole host of factors that come into play, like canvas size and number of colors used, and even the use of outlines or no outlines I find has a pretty dramatic effect on the approach and appearance of a pixel art piece. So normally to come up with an idea for a new piece, for me it's just really like mentally filling in each of these parameters to achieve that particular result. I kind of think of it like programming, like you've got a bunch of input parameters that you set up, you let it run, and then you get a certain output from it. Is that how programming works? I don't really know. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but I hope you get what I'm saying. And sometimes if I'm stuck on deciding what the subject of my art should be, like if I don't really have any ideas already in mind, I'll just consider things I haven't attempted before, or certain areas that I might need to work on. So for this piece, I was thinking it'd be useful to attempt something that just in general had more plants and foliage in it. My mind tends to go to other details first, like sort of sci-fi or technical stuff. So that's kind of one thing to work on. And the other idea I had in mind was to make something that was just kind of lighthearted and pleasant, almost like a slice of lifestyle rather than having any kind of dark or mysterious elements to it. So between those two thoughts, the plants and the lightheartedness, I came up with this idea of like a little flower shop scene and just kind of run with those themes and see what happens. For this one, I'm working again within a style that I've used for other street scenes before, where I complete all the line work first and then go in after and add shading and whatever kind of color palette I think will suit it. These pieces have all been on a canvas size of 270 by 270 pixels, and then the actual artwork area within the letterbox is 270 by 216 pixels. Usually I just always set up my overall canvas size as a square because I'm used to posting to Instagram, which you don't even have to accommodate that ratio anymore, but I'm just used to it anyway. And also it's just kind of funny that I'm making a picture out of tiny squares and then the whole thing itself like occupies a giant square canvas, so there's that too. So at this point in the time-lapse, the main architecture of the flower shop is in place, and I start to do laps around the canvas just looking for areas to decorate with little details that support the overall theme. Like little environmental things that just kind of help this place feel like a real believable location. But because of the way I do laps around the screen, the time-lapse for the upcoming section was actually really chaotic, so rather than subjecting you to that dizzy time-lapse, let's view the next bit as just sort of like a steady in-place time-lapse, based on a few checkpoint layers I had along the way, adding these environmental details. Okay, there we go, and now we come to a few important final additions for the line work. Firstly, I've got a little flower bed here that I just wanted to fill with different looking flowers. So I started by exploring a few different flower designs off in the sky there, kind of approaching it like tiles, and then just sort of mix and match them by copy pasting them into the flower bed and just kind of cleaning up the whole thing. I added in a girl waiting at a bus stop there, and you'll see I had a reference layer of the line work from my Cyberpunk street piece that I was using just as a size reference. I like to keep the sizing consistent between multiple pieces that are in the same style, and also to make sure that like all the environmental sizing is compatible, like to make sure that these people can fit in the doorways and stuff that I'm drawing. I can't remember what came first from the original piece in this series, but either way the girl here is about 40 pixels tall from head to toe, and this starts out pretty much as a really rough sprite. It's a method I like to call the get pixels onto the screen and sort it out later approach. Just sometimes it's easier to get something there first and then kind of spot what's wrong with it rather than trying to be perfect the whole time. So it starts out a little ambiguous, but I continue like adding and deleting pixels to refine it, and then also like flipping the canvas to the mirror image to keep refreshing my view of that sprite work. And now we come to the final piece of the line work, which is a large palm tree that I was just sort of putting off adding to this top corner. I'd never made a large palm tree before, but you know, that's sort of part of what this whole piece was about, like stepping outside of the comfort zone a little bit. So we can watch me struggle here a bit, finding those large leaf shapes. And by the way, I do all my work just using my laptop trackpad. Some people would say that's crazy, but it's honestly just the way I've got used to working. So the palm trees there are literally just me like using my finger on that trackpad. So considering that, it's not really that bad. For the tree trunk, actually, is it called a trunk for palm trees? Or is it like a stem or a stalk? I'm not sure. Either way, I worked out this curved line using a larger pencil size. And you can see I'm trying to find the right curvature for the composition here. I give it a bend that sort of directs the flow towards the center of the artwork and points of interest. When you've got an opportunity to add direction to stuff like this, it can really help bring a composition together just to keep the eye engaged, like thinking about the flow of objects like this. At least that's kind of what I hope for this one anyway. That's just sort of a newer idea I've been playing with lately. So after putting in all these initial shapes, I zoom in really close and do a lot of refinement to smooth out these lines. All in all, I'm pretty happy with how it came out for a first attempt at a palm tree. And again, it just kind of fulfills what I was hoping to get out of attempting this concept anyway. Now that the line work's in a good spot, I move on to shading and color, and I like to approach big scenes like this in grayscale first to define the contrast of everything, and then use sort of a color filter to apply color into those light and dark areas while maintaining that contrast. I thought this piece would look good with a narrow range of contrast, almost like a washed out sort of look, so I'm just shading it with evenly spaced gray tones that have brightness values between 20 and 80. So the black and white ends of that spectrum are cut short and don't really reach their full extremes, which just sort of softens the overall look. And I think even from here I go and eventually make it even brighter than this, but for now that's kind of what we're doing. Finding the right colors is obviously quite an important step, since different colors convey different emotions to a piece and kind of affect how it's perceived. One approach is obviously to color everything it would be in real life, you know, like plants are green, sidewalks and the buildings are gray, sky is blue, stuff like that. But I think it's kind of more powerful to consider your scene or concept and like fit appropriate colors based on those themes or emotions. So we've got this sort of beachy, flowery vibe going for this one. So for color, I was thinking towards like pastel-y pinks for the main coloring, and then some other kind of pastel-y yellow or green tones to complement the plants and other details. If you're curious about finding nice color combinations, one approach to design a palette is studying harmony relationships on the color wheel. You can find tools and references online. One that I know of is Adobe Color. So there's a few color harmony, like quote-unquote rules that you can follow when searching for pleasant-looking color combinations. Like analogous is where you use a set of colors from one small portion of the color wheel. Usually my favorites though are where you mix in opposite colors, like the complementary style, which creates palettes of like exact opposing colors on the wheel. And then another one like this is the triad relationship, where colors along each third of the color wheel kind of create a nice harmony. And this is sort of where I want to be for this piece, kind of dipping into like pinks and cyans and yellowish tones. So these sorts of tools are kind of fun to play around with, just when learning about color harmony, and might help to also think about like injecting certain vibes into your artwork. There's also pages to explore like different color palettes based on photography or current trends within illustrated work, so just kind of a useful resource to know about. To apply colors over my grayscale image, I normally make a new layer filled with a single color I want and then set it to the color blending mode before hue shifting around to refine everything. I've just discovered this new feature in Photoshop though, and when I say new, I mean it's new to me, because it's been there the whole time, I just wasn't aware of it or using it, I guess. But it's called a gradient map, and it lets you use like a gradient of colors over your image. So all the darker areas in the image get assigned the color towards the first end of the gradient, and then gradually lighter areas will adopt a color heading towards the second color of your gradient. And this has tremendous use for pixel art because we can kind of build a hue shifted palette in one easy step like this, especially when having laid out the contrast in grayscale first. I'm still kind of getting the hang of it, so I had to add an adjustment layer that's boosting my saturation quite a bit here, but I was able to find the main color story of that sort of pink to yellow type of hue shifted palette. To get my greenish colors, I just started over again and made a new gradient map that I thought looked okay on its own, and then brought in those colors to my pink style image and started replacing certain objects and things with the green tones. So this was just kind of an experiment in coloring for me using this gradient map approach, but I had fun finding these colors, and I think I was able to wrangle them together all right in the end. So I'll go ahead now and reveal the final artwork, and then we'll come back briefly to discuss a little touch of animation that I added to this one. Alright, so here is Floral 95. Alright, and here we are back in Photoshop, and I just wanted to point out a few animation things real quick. First of all, the fundamental loop of this animation is built in multiples of 8 frames. I set up these 8 frames initially to define the timing of the cats and the girl kind of bobbing her head to the music. Rather than just moving her head up and down, I played with the perspective instead, so to tilt her head down, I just shifted her eyes and hairline down by a single pixel. And then since she's got the ponytail, you can kind of play with that perspective and have it raised by a single pixel in the back to really sell that head tilt. So yeah, those are kind of the initial 8 frames, and then what I did was copy paste these frames up to a count of 24 frames to do the looping for that LED style display on the front of the shop. And those just use different scrolling effects that are kind of hidden below the layers. To give it some variety, they scroll at different speeds, but everything syncs up to a total of 24 frames. Some scroll at a rate of like 2 pixels per frame, and others are 4 pixels per frame, and they're kind of spaced out accordingly to catch itself in a loop like that. And then finally, I copy pasted those 24 frames up to a total of 120 frames overall, just to add in the scrolling clouds. And yeah, 120 frames sounds like a lot, but it was only necessary because I wanted the clouds to be scrolling like really slowly and calmly, meaning they would need a really long time before they would loop again. So you could consider them to be like a repeating unit that's like 240 pixels wide in a sense, and they scroll at a rate of 2 pixels every frame. Alright, let's go into some CRT close-ups to finish this out. By the way, I've done this for the past few time-lapse videos, and I've decided to name this recurring segment CRT Time. And that's my avatar even holding a little cup of tea to go along with it. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this process. Thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.